In the shadow of 9/11, America is at war with a relentless enemy.
We kill civilian infidels in exchange for those of our children that they kill.
Just the words of Osama bin Laden can incite his followers to sow death and destruction.
We will not stop this fight. We are at war and I am a soldier.
Al-Qaeda, once just a small group in Afghanistan, is now a worldwide movement.
Anybody who has a score to settle with the Western power, that is Al-Qaeda.
Former intelligence officers reveal how Al-Qaeda uses the media to recruit new followers. Al-Qaeda insiders will show how this terror cult gained a foothold in Iraq, Europe, and Saudi Arabia. Now Al-Qaeda hopes to strike again in the United States.
When we bomb their cities and civilians like they bomb ours, or destroy their infrastructure and means of transportation like they destroy ours, or kidnap their non-combatants like they kidnap ours, no sane Muslim should shed tears for them.
Is this American the new face of Al-Qaeda? This man, Adam Gadahn, has been transformed from a rock-loving Southern California teenager to a high-level terrorist spokesman. Gadahn converted to Islam at 17 and left the U.S. for Pakistan in 1998. Today, he repeatedly threatens the lives of his fellow Americans in Al-Qaeda-produced videotapes. Now known as Azam the American, Adam Gadahn might best represent Al-Qaeda's post-9/11 transformation. From a terrorist army based in Afghanistan to something potentially more dangerous, a worldwide movement attracting disaffected Muslims in Europe, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, and even the OC, Orange County, California. Since 9/11, the American military has weakened Al-Qaeda's leadership and removed many of its sanctuaries. But Al-Qaeda has adapted. By 2006, Al-Qaeda isn't a physical entity so much as an idea that connects hundreds of independent terrorist groups around the globe. The next major attack against the U.S. might be carried out not by Arabs like 9/11 mastermind Mohammed Atta, but by European or American Islamic converts like the shoe bomber Richard Reed, Adam Gadahn, or the American Taliban, John Walker Lind.
Militants in Pakistan and Afghanistan will point to Lynn and say, there's proof that our way is a global movement that will, in the end, overtake everything. If we can win the heart of an American in San Francisco, then we can take the world.
Today's Al-Qaeda recruits homegrown extremists capable of carrying out attacks without orders from a central command. Bin Laden is happy to be more of a figurehead than a military leader, according to this reporter who has interviewed him several times.
He himself told me, he said, look, it's not my job to organize attacks. My job is to create awareness, to motivate the Muslims, to tell them about the real enemy. And he said the real enemy is America.
Here in Quetta, Pakistan, Maulana Noor Mohammed is a leader of the Jamiat Ulema Islam, or JUI, one of the country's largest and most powerful Islamic parties. It is typical of dozens of similar groups around the world who support Al-Qaeda. Mohammed is a friend of bin Laden's and has met with him frequently.
More than 30 times. I think he is a fine and strong holy warrior. He cares about the Arabs and others. He has devoted all his wealth to his cause.
Groups like the JUI work to enact change on the local level. Meanwhile, bin Laden has set Al-Qaeda's sights on the U.S.
Thank you all. Please be seated.
The battle has moved to inside America. We will work to continue this battle, God permitting, until victory or until we meet God.
Since 9/11, Al-Qaeda has communicated to the West primarily through audio and videotapes. These clips provide rare clues into bin Laden's motivations and future plans. U.S. intelligence agents carefully scrutinize every aspect of each al-Qaeda message. The al-Qaeda figures in these videos are so elusive they might as well be ghosts. Some literally talk to us from beyond the grave. Others speak from so deep in hiding that the world's most powerful armed forces can't touch them.
Do you know where I am? I am among the Muslim masses, and I am enjoying the grace Allah has bestowed upon me. I am enjoying their support, generosity, protection, and their participation in the jihad against you until we defeat you, Allah willing.
Why hasn't the U.S. been attacked since 9/11? Some believe al-Qaeda is unable, others that it is simply biding time. But bin Laden has increasingly begun to measure his victories less in terms of body counts than dollars and cents.
Bin Laden's theory of the war that he's fighting now is that the United States economy and society is just as fragile as the Soviet Union's was during the 1980s, and that the way to expose this fundamental weakness is to draw it into a prolonged, financially draining, demoralizing conflict.
There will be a struggle against them in Afghanistan and Iraq, and its economy will fail like the Russians.
As of 2006, the war on terror has cost the United States an estimated $507 billion. America hasn't been attacked since 9/11, but one national intelligence report concludes that U.S. policies have led to more of the world's Muslims becoming radicalized. Many admire bin Laden for giving a voice to a set of broadly held grievances.
Basic political disputes which are leading to alienation, hopelessness, anger in the Muslim world.
America's support for Israel is hugely unpopular in the Islamic world. The U.S. war in Iraq also adds to anti-American sentiment. Sadiq Malki studies issues affecting Muslims in the Middle East.
The United States must mend its policies in the area. It's creating an enemy out of 1 billion people, and that's very unfair from the perspective of the American public, to place Americans and the American interest in such danger.
We have been fighting you because we are free men who do not remain silent in the face of injustice. We want to restore our nation's freedom. Just as you violate our security, we violate yours.
Bin Laden is offended by the very presence of U.S. troops in the Middle East.
Osama has a map of the Middle East, and he shows it to whoever visits him, the areas where the American forces are standing.
Much of the Islamic world believes America isn't fighting a war on terror, but a war against their religion.
Battle is going on against Islam from the Western countries, unfortunately, and it is visible. We cannot hide it.
The Crusade War is meant to destroy Islam. Christians have fought 11 wars with Muslims, and they were defeated in every war. Bush has announced the 12th war, the War on Terror.
The terrorists are traitors to their own faith.
In this perceived clash of civilizations, bin Laden justifies al-Qaeda's killing of innocents as simple retaliation.
We kill civilian infidels in exchange for those of our children that they kill.
He actually believes that this war has been forecasted by the Quran and that it is a test of Muslims, a test to demonstrate for God who is truly faithful.
Most of the world's Muslims do not share bin Laden's taste for violence. Saudi Arabia is home to some of Islam's most sacred sites. Here, prominent scholars like Sadiq Malki agree with many of bin Laden's complaints against America, but they are repulsed by al-Qaeda's actions.
This is where Osama bin Laden have totally made a big mistake. Based on the Quran, I cannot, for no reason, justify the killing of civilians.
But bin Laden makes little distinction between soldiers and civilians. He believes all Westerners should be held accountable for the actions taken by their governments. In 2002, during the run-up to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, bin Laden issues a chilling warning to every nation supporting the American-led military campaign.
Just as you kill, so you shall be killed.
The West is about to get its first taste of the new, decentralized al-Qaeda. Here, in Madrid, Spain, a small group of men who have never met bin Laden are inspired by his words to act against their country's support of the Iraq War. These 13 westernized Muslims represent al-Qaeda's future, a homegrown cell with no connection to Osama bin Laden, but a violent passion to act in his name. 7:00 a.m. The men quietly step onto commuter trains at the Alcalá de Henares station just east of Madrid. They leave 13 backpacks on 4 different trains, and then quickly get off just before the trains pull away. About 40 minutes later, Jesus Ramirez, Victor Munayan, and thousands of others are beginning their morning commute.
The train was awfully full, so I went up and noticed that on the right, there was an empty seat. As I was going towards it, I heard the first explosion of the bomb.
The lights went out and you couldn't see anything. Then I saw everyone starting to rush out. After I got out of the car, it took about 3 to 4 steps when I saw a bright red light. The second explosion.
In 3 minutes during the height of rush hour, 10 explosive devices have been detonated in Madrid's rail system. Exactly 2.5 years to the day since the attacks of 9/11, Spain has suffered one of the deadliest terror attacks in European history. 191 people are dead and at least 1,800 injured. Police make their first arrests 2 days after the attack, taking 5 men into custody. One of them is Jamal Zougam, a Moroccan with alleged connections to Abu Dada, a member of al-Qaeda implicated in the 9/11 attacks. Weeks later, the Madrid police raid an apartment believed to be holding some of the remaining suspects. As the cops try to forcibly enter, 7 men inside blow themselves up, killing a police officer in the process. In the meantime, Spanish authorities released a transcript of a seized videotape. These are the words of the self-described military spokesman for al-Qaeda in Europe. We declare our responsibility for what happened in Madrid exactly 2.5 years after the attacks on New York and Washington. It is a response to your collaboration with the criminals, Bush and his allies. This is a response to the crimes that you have caused in the world, and specifically in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there will be more if God wills it. The attack apparently has achieved its intended effect. 3 days after the bombings, Spanish citizens vote to replace the incumbent government that was supporting the U.S. war in Iraq. The attacks are the election's decisive factor. Experts believe that bin Laden didn't plan the Madrid attacks, he only inspired them. This is the new al-Qaeda, a decentralized movement with no physical base.
Osama has told you repeatedly, your security is dependent on our security.
Osama bin Laden will continue to inspire new would-be terrorists, even as a U.S. manhunt puts intense pressure on his hiding places. The attack on Madrid's transportation system reveals that since 9/11, al-Qaeda has evolved into a loosely connected worldwide network of disaffected Muslims. This new al-Qaeda has no physical base, but here, in Pakistan, an important infrastructure still supports Osama bin Laden and other al-Qaeda leaders. They managed to elude capture despite the continued efforts of the U.S. military. Since 2002, the U.S. has enjoyed a string of successes with the capture of high-profile targets like 9/11 conspirators Ramzi bin al-Shibh and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But the biggest prizes are still at large. Officials believe bin Laden, his chief deputy Ayman al-Zawahiri, and a small group of al-Qaeda lieutenants are hiding in the frontier provinces along the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is a lawless expanse of tribal land, ungoverned and largely untouched by the Afghan and Pakistani governments. Bin Laden and Zawahiri have set up new training camps here amidst a network of thousands of trails and some of the highest mountains on Earth. The border crossing itself is rugged and chaotic, but this Pakistani military officer insists that al-Qaeda figures cannot enter Pakistan without being detected.
There's the entry place from where people come into Pakistan and cross over to Afghanistan. You see along the border, we have created all those fence and barbed wire to prevent any illegal crossing into the country.
But an American official says the border is more porous than the Pakistanis are willing to admit.
You'd have to have an outpost every few hundred meters to be able to observe the border. People being able to move back and forth and find safe havens on either side of the border is as easy as crossing the street in the United States.
The U.S. military presence in Afghanistan has led to the conclusion that bin Laden and his leadership are hiding on the Pakistani side of the border. Extremist groups like the Jamaat Ulema Islam are openly willing to harbor al-Qaeda.
It is an obligation of every Muslim in every country to protect their friend from the enemy.
Home to a fiercely independent and heavily armed population, even the Pakistani military is wary of this violent tribal region.
Sending an army up into these hills is not a simple mission. People who live in these regions have been running their own affairs since time immemorial. They are proud, martial, and well-resourced, in part because they have built up a rich history of smuggling and other criminal enterprises that have enriched them.
Amongst the drug runners and booming black market for weapons, outsiders are easily identified. Here, in the Dara gun market, local guides advise Westerners to stay away, as they are likely to be shot on sight.
We make weapons here. Pistols, Kalashnikovs, repeaters, and copies of the new weapons that are manufactured in America and sent to us. The local versions work even better than those produced abroad.
Many of these weapons wind up in the hands of al-Qaeda. Some even cross the border, where they are used to attack U.S. troops.
There's a portable rocket grenade launcher has been captured in an encounter with the terrorists and will be deposited again with the headquarters.
The best weapon, you can buy it here, off in the border areas. So this is what the reality of the environment of Pakistan is.
Kalashnikovs for men in the tribal areas are like purses for women in the United States. I mean, gotta have one.
Officially, the U.S. military is not allowed to enter the tribal areas without Pakistani permission, so America must depend on Pakistan's troops to conduct most ground operations against al-Qaeda. But in the skies, the U.S. deploys a powerful weapon on both sides of the Afghan-Pakistan border, the Predator. This unmanned drone is equipped with surveillance cameras for intelligence gathering. The Predator can also carry missiles. In May 2005, suspected al-Qaeda explosive expert Haytham Yemeni was reportedly killed by a Predator missile in northwest Pakistan. But other Predator strikes have missed their targets. So far, neither the Predator nor Pakistan's ground troops have located bin Laden or his closest aides. Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf blames this failure on U.S. intelligence.
Technical and aerial surveillance is more from the American side and not Pakistani side. So if there is a failure of intelligence, may I suggest that the failure is more on the US side than on the Pakistani side.
A former U.S. intelligence officer believes the hunt for bin Laden may be hampered by an over-reliance on technology like the Predator.
We can't really rely upon automated assassination. We have to have people on the ground.
Former U.S. spies agree that human intelligence will be the key to finally catching bin Laden. But 5 years after 9/11, have any American spies penetrated al-Qaeda?
I don't know. And if I knew, I wouldn't tell you.
We've never gotten anyone inside of any meaningful sense. In the inner circles, I think we've picked up people on the periphery, but the distance between the periphery and the center is pretty far.
Osama bin Laden has been able to elude the U.S. military by avoiding any communication that could be traced electronically, cellular calls, emails, and money transfers that can easily be tracked. Al-Qaeda leaders rely instead on the ancient system of couriers. A hand-delivered message goes from bin Laden through over a dozen different messengers until it reaches its recipient, usually the Arab television networks Al Jazeera or Al Arabia. The process can take as long as 2 months. The messengers are young, die-hard members of Al-Qaeda who know that getting caught would mean arrest and harsh interrogation. At least 2 Al-Qaeda couriers have been arrested since 9/11, both in Pakistan, but they have only revealed one small link in a very long chain. Bin Laden and Zawahiri released dozens of audio and videotapes through this intricate courier system. They have mounted an ongoing propaganda campaign that has averaged a tape a week in 2006 alone. Al-Qaeda even has its own sophisticated television production unit. It's called As-Sahab, which translates to the cloud. As-Sahab outfits Al-Qaeda propaganda with all the latest professional graphics. In this video, Ayman al-Zawahiri praises Al-Qaeda's accomplishments.
Al-Qaeda is spreading, growing, and becoming stronger. By the grace of Allah, it has become a popular and pioneering organization.
These messages keep Al-Qaeda in the public eye, positioning bin Laden as an enticing figure for many Muslim young men looking for religious inspiration and direction. Bin Laden patterns his speaking cadence after the rhythms of the written word in the Quran. He tries to emphasize the similarities between himself and the Prophet Muhammad. Bin Laden maintains the image of a charismatic holy man finding refuge from his enemies in a cave. This is also cribbed from the story of the Prophet. But bin Laden's studied public persona is an act, say those who knew the Al-Qaeda leader in his younger days as a volunteer fighter in the Afghan-Soviet jihad. Then, bin Laden was hardly a larger-than-life figure.
The last time I saw him, he showed no signs or symptoms of being the man that he is today. Quite shy and reticent.
No, Osama bin Laden, he was a normal man. Now, how come he is now very superpower? This is the Westerns making. To me, he was, and he was a very normal man.
To his followers, bin Laden has become not just a man or a leader, but a symbol.
Like a Robin Hood, you support the person who challenges world authority and bloodies its nose.
He is a very simple and generous person. Not everyone can do what he does, have all the wealth in the world, but still live in those forests and caves.
Caves may be the ideal backdrop for Al-Qaeda propaganda, but they are also proof to experts that military pressure is working, that Al-Qaeda's ability to fund, direct, and enable attacks against the West has diminished.
Al-Qaeda, its backbone has been broken. Al-Qaeda has ceased to exist as a cohesive organization. Their vertical and lateral linkages, they have been broken.
Most of the evidence available suggests that Al-Qaeda, the organization, does not have the unmolested time and space to carry out an attack as ambitious and complex as the September 11th attacks.
Al-Qaeda's physical center of operations in Afghanistan is gone, but its propaganda is spreading into new locales around the globe. The U.S. and Pakistan continue their attempts to capture or kill bin Laden, Zawahiri, and other Al-Qaeda leaders. Meanwhile, the U.S. invasion of Iraq gives Al-Qaeda a new sanctuary, new leaders, and a bloody insurgency that will threaten the entire Middle East. In the aftermath of 9/11, there is little left of the Al-Qaeda organization in Afghanistan that planned and issued the order for the attacks. Osama bin Laden's followers have lost their training camps, funds, and the ability to move freely throughout the world. But in 2003, with the American invasion of Iraq, al-Qaeda seizes a new opportunity to strike at its enemies.
Bin Laden welcomed the American invasion because he thought that it would provide coherence for al-Qaeda. Indeed, he starts talking about the invasion of Iraq as a gift to his war.
Bin Laden sees the war in Iraq as more evidence that the United States is bent on fighting the Islamic world. He believes this American occupation offends Muslims and brings many to his cause. In 2004, a new leader of al-Qaeda emerges from the sands of this war zone. His name is Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, and he claims to lead al-Qaeda in Iraq. Former criminal and sex offender, Zarqawi has a reputation for violence and has little religious training.
He's not very well educated, he's a thug, he doesn't have any of the finesse of bin Laden, he doesn't use the same historical narrative that bin Laden does.
Zarqawi relies instead on street smarts to establish himself as the new military leader of al-Qaeda throughout the world. Zarqawi fights the war locally in Iraq, while bringing in recruits and securing funds for operations in Europe and the Middle East.
What Zarqawi seemed to be very good at was rallying young people. He was very attractive to young men and really brought a lot of those people into Iraq.
Al-Qaeda in Iraq perfects an unconventional way to attack heavily armored American troops and vehicles: roadside bombs. Devastating explosives are disguised as boxes and soda cans, or even hidden in the carcasses of donkeys. Uneasily, Americans patrol the cities of Iraq, unsure of who or what to trust. Since the beginning of the war, these improvised roadside bombs have caused more than 1/3 of U.S. casualties. U.S. officials believe Zarqawi is responsible for more than 700 bombings in Iraq, as well as other terrorist operations in Turkey and Jordan. In December 2004, Osama bin Laden releases an audio tape announcing Zarqawi as Prince of al-Qaeda in Iraq. He asks al-Qaeda members to listen to Zarqawi and obey him in his good deeds.
The warrior commander, honored comrade Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, and the groups who joined him are the best of the community that is fighting for the sake of the word of Allah. Their courageous operations against the Americans and against the apostate government have gladdened us.
Zarqawi's organization displays a new side of al-Qaeda, one where operations are planned in online chat rooms and successful attacks are aired on al-Qaeda web pages. Now, much of al-Qaeda's religious and terrorist training takes place on the internet.
It's now possible for a small group of angry young men to find reasonably reliable instructions about how to make crude devices. In chat rooms and other facilities available on the web, it is possible to exchange information with experts.
Zarqawi even films several beheadings of Western workers in Iraq, and then posts the gruesome videos online.
The spilling of blood is for them part of almost a divine revenge.
Zarqawi brought to al-Qaeda a couple of things that they welcomed, at least one thing that they didn't. The beheadings, the videotape beheadings, was something that didn't sit very well with Muslim populace.
Osama bin Laden is among those who disapprove of Zarqawi's videotaped bloodlettings. But increasingly, the al-Qaeda in Iraq leader seems to be taking his orders from no one. In a move unprecedented within the larger al-Qaeda organization, Zarqawi declares war on other Muslims, the Shia of Iraq. Islam split into Sunni and Shiite sects in the 7th century over a disagreement about who should succeed the Prophet Muhammad. Zarqawi's extremist Sunni view holds that Shiism is an affront to true Islamic faith. Hoping to incite a Sunni-Shia civil war in Iraq, Zarqawi carries out several attacks against Shia mosques, killing dozens of innocent Muslims. These vicious attacks on the Shia are broadly condemned in the Islamic world, and even inside al-Qaeda itself. Zarqawi is reprimanded for his brutal tactics in a letter allegedly from Ayman al-Zawahiri, al-Qaeda's second-in-command. Zawahiri reportedly explains that beheadings and attacks on other Muslims are alienating many of Zarqawi's potential followers. Zarqawi makes other mistakes during his leadership of al-Qaeda in Iraq, one of which could be fatal. Instead of remaining in hiding like bin Laden and Zawahiri, Zarqawi instead travels the battlefields of Iraq as a field commander, encouraging his units of fighters, welcoming new recruits, and coordinating with other leaders of the Iraqi insurgency. Always on the move, he greatly increases his chances of capture. For weeks, the U.S. military, with the help of Jordanian intelligence, tracks the movement of Zarqawi's spiritual advisor, Abu Abdulrahman al-Iraqi, waiting for him to meet Zarqawi. On June 7, 2006, intelligence confirms the target's precise location. Zarqawi's coordinates are programmed into the flight patterns of two 500-pound American bombs. Less than an hour later, the al-Qaeda in Iraq leader is dead. While Zarqawi's killing is a victory for the U.S. military, Osama bin Laden doesn't necessarily see it as a defeat. Zarqawi may be more valuable as a martyr than a divisive al-Qaeda leader.
I think bin Laden may be satisfied that Zarqawi is not competing for leadership.
I'm not prepared to say that al-Qaeda found a way to rat him out, but I'm very sure al-Qaeda is not upset that he's dead.
Iraq proves that al-Qaeda is spreading, but Zarqawi shows that the more al-Qaeda spreads, the harder it is for bin Laden to maintain direct control. Zarqawi's cell is but one of several homegrown groups to emerge in the wake of 9/11. Like their former home in Afghanistan, Iraq has become a place of battle and training, a meeting place for the warriors of jihad.
Nothing has done more for them than the invasion of Iraq.
But this is not the only gathering place for the soldiers of al-Qaeda. A small cell inspired by the jihad in Iraq is now gathering in England, where 4 men pledge allegiance to al-Qaeda. The 4 assemble bombs with high explosives and place them into backpacks. Then they quietly board trains on the London Underground. Al-Qaeda's presence in Iraq continues to grow, and anger over the US-led war helps fuel the creation of new terrorist cells worldwide. An estimated 15 to 20 million Muslims live in Europe, and less than half of all Europeans support America's war on terror. In 2005, British protesters staged massive rallies against England's involvement in Iraq. Meanwhile, 4 Brits plan to take more radical action. Mohammed Sadiq Khan is a 30-year-old teacher of Pakistani descent. He leads an al-Qaeda cell made up of childhood acquaintances from the Leeds area. These men's recruitment into al-Qaeda marks a new milestone for Osama bin Laden's movement. Unlike the bombers in Madrid, all the members of Khan's cell have been born and raised in Western society. This is a crucial step towards one of al-Qaeda's biggest goals, another attack in the United States. The next 9/11 could be carried out by Europeans like Khan, according to the experts.
If you had to put your finger down at one spot and worry the most of where future 9/11 attacks might come from, you'd still have to say that Western Europe is probably the most dangerous platform.
In 2004, Khan and another member of his cell traveled to the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan to meet with the leaders of al-Qaeda.
The path that they traveled lights up, in a small way, the broader infrastructure that al-Qaeda uses in Pakistan and along the Afghan border. It's a network of personal contact and trust.
For 3 months, the Brits train in al-Qaeda's military camps in the tribal areas, with Khan showing particular promise to the al-Qaeda leadership.
He had probably met with at least Zawahiri, and Zawahiri seems to confirm that in a couple of statements that he's made on video.
Their goal, for which they came to the camps of Qaeda al-Jihad, was to carry out a martyrdom operation. They were bonded by a great love for the sake of Allah. Together, they formed a great team.
Khan returns to the UK in February 2005 and begins making preparations to attack. July 7, 2005. The city of London wakes up to heavy showers. Wearing casual Western clothes, baseball caps, and backpacks filled with between 4 and 11 pounds of homemade explosives, Khan and his men enter the King's Cross tube station and join the crowd boarding trains packed with morning commuters.
We got onto the train and it was going along, and I remember I was changing a song on my iPod, and literally when I changed the song, all the glass in the carriage smashed, and everyone was kind of just for a second stunned.
Khan and 2 of his accomplices have blown themselves up, killing dozens of people instantly. The 4th member of Khan's cell detonates his explosives on a double-decker bus. The bombings kill 52 commuters. It is the first suicide attack in Western Europe. In a martyrdom video released 2 months later on Al Jazeera, Mohammed Sadiq Khan reads a statement claiming responsibility.
I and thousands like me have forsaken everything for what we believe. Our drive and motivation doesn't come from tangible commodities that this world has to offer. Our religion is Islam, obedience to the one true God, Allah.
Another of the bombers, Shehzad Tanweer, appears in a separate al-Qaeda video released after the attacks.
To the non-Muslims of Britain, you may wonder what you have done to deserve this. You have openly declared war on Islam and other foreigners in the crusade against the Muslims.
In another video, Ayman al-Zawahiri places the London bombings in the company of al-Qaeda's greatest successes.
This blessed raid, like its glorious predecessors in New York, Washington, and Madrid, brought the battle to the enemy's soil after long centuries in which the enemy brought the battle to our lands.
Zawahiri and Khan each promise more bloodshed if Western powers refuse to change their policies in the Islamic world.
Until we feel security, you will be our targets. And until you stop the bombing, gassing, imprisonment and torture of my people, we will not stop this fight. We are at war and I'm a soldier. Now you too will taste the reality of this situation.
Just as they have made rivers of blood flow in our countries, we will blow up volcanoes of rage with Allah's help in their countries.
The operational connection of al-Qaeda to the attacks is still unclear, but al-Qaeda quickly begins using the London bombings in their propaganda.
If they didn't command the attack, they surely were prepared to support it in terms of after-the-fact video of the last will and testament of 2 of the attackers.
The operation didn't require any micromanagement or financing from al-Qaeda's core leadership. Khan and his men easily raised the necessary money, less than $15,000, through credit cards, bad checks, and personal loans. The official British investigation of the attacks finds that none of the bombers showed any outward signs of violent or extremist intentions. Each member of the cell was raised and educated in the West. Friends knew Khan by his anglicized nickname, Sid. In fact, the background of the London bombers fits the profile of thousands of young European Muslims.
So what is happening there? There is obviously an anger in them. What is the anger?
What's perverse is the process of westernization in Europe amongst the Muslim communities is very advanced. But westernization can actually fuel Islamic radicalism. It sort of wipe cleans the traditions that young men would have inherited from their fathers and their grandfathers.
In 2004, Islamic tradition comes under attack in France with a controversial ban on headscarves or veils. European Islamic communities are also outraged in early 2006 by Danish cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad. It's another story in the US. America has historically been more welcoming to religious and ethnic groups than Europe. Experts say that American Muslims have better social and economic opportunities than their European counterparts. Some former US spies believe that poverty and alienation helps al-Qaeda recruit European Muslims.
At this point, I would say that the Europeans, with their own colonial histories and migratory and immigrant patterns that they have, and the social and economic situations in those countries, are more at risk for homegrown than we are.
But experts worry that Europe could be the launching point for future attacks on the US. A new terrorist plot will confirm their worst fears. A year after the London bombings, a different British cell allegedly targets 10 airplanes bound for America. Their weapon, undetectable liquid explosives. Since 9/11, al-Qaeda has spread from Afghanistan to countries in the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. It also occupies new virtual spaces with websites on the internet. The changing face of the movement makes it harder and harder to forecast where the next 9/11 attacks will come from and just who will carry them out.
Al-Qaeda is now a global franchise. Anybody who has a score to settle with the Western power, with America in particular, that is Al-Qaeda.
Young Arab men traveling to the U.S. from the Middle East cannot escape the scrutiny of U.S. security. It is more likely, then, that al-Qaeda's future foot soldiers will come from Western nations like their 9/11 predecessors, who lived in Hamburg, Germany. Citizens from many European countries are eligible to enter and remain in the U.S. for up to 90 days without a visa. Al-Qaeda's recruiting efforts increasingly target Europeans and dual citizenship holders. In the summer of 2006, al-Qaeda uses London as the springboard for an ambitious new terror plot against the United States. On August 10th, police arrest 24 British-born Muslims accused of preparing a deadly attack against US-bound aircraft. The would-be terrorists reportedly hope to smuggle undetectable liquid explosives aboard up to 10 planes leaving London's Heathrow Airport. They allegedly plan to detonate their bombs simultaneously in a terrorist attack that, if successful, will be the most deadly since 9/11. Scotland Yard uncovers the London cell through a trail of clues leading back to Pakistan's tribal region. A man named Rashid Rauf is the alleged ringleader of the operation and a British-born citizen holding English and Pakistani passports. Rauf has extensive connections to al-Qaeda. His cell is the second to emerge in England in little over a year, and part of a troubling overall trend. As European society proves an increasingly fertile ground for homegrown terror, U.S. al-Qaeda experts are forced to consider America's worst nightmare: that future attacks could come from an enemy within. Al-Qaeda only seems to be getting better at recruiting native-born Westerners. But so far, American Muslims have proven largely immune to al-Qaeda's militant rhetoric. In fact, U.S. mosques have been an important first line of defense against extremism. Experts say that counter-terrorist efforts would probably fail without the help of American Muslims.
We certainly don't have the capacity, the FBI doesn't have the capacity to monitor and penetrate the Muslim community in the United States in the way that you would have to try to thwart internal operations generated by radical American Muslims.
The threat of internally spawned terror attacks proves to be real. During the summer of 2006, 7 members of a Miami group called the Seas of David reportedly swear an oath of allegiance to Osama bin Laden. With no formal connection to bin Laden, The Miami cell allegedly seeks weapons, financing, and training from an FBI agent posing as an al-Qaeda operative. The targets of their proposed terrorist operation are the FBI's Miami field office and Chicago's Sears Tower. On June 23rd, the FBI arrests all 7 men associated with the plot. 5 are U.S. citizens. Most of the group's members are unemployed with criminal records. Wearing homemade Stars of David patches and subscribing to an amalgamation of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic beliefs, the Seas of David are often described as more of a gang or a cult than a true al-Qaeda cell. But some experts argue that al-Qaeda itself is just one big cult.
Al-Qaeda was and still is, and I think will continue to be, a cult with all of the makings of a cult.
Here, in Saudi Arabia, authorities handle enemy combatants more like brainwashed cult followers in need of deprogramming.
When these people are captured, they're immediately brought into contact with their families so that they can reestablish family ties. And then they are put with a psychiatrist who studies their cases, tries to figure out therapy for them. And then they're brought into contact with religious teachers who challenge their basic philosophical beliefs.
While America keeps suspected al-Qaeda locked away in foreign prisons like Guantanamo Bay, Saudi Arabia releases those it judges cured.
Those who had not yet become actual criminals, they have been released from jail.
This novel approach to the al-Qaeda problem seems unlikely to ever be implemented in America. But it's simply a well-meaning attempt, Saudi Arabian officials say, to address the roots of Islamic extremism.
People in most Arab and Muslim countries have no basic beef with the people of the United States or even with the values of the United States. It is more the policies.
Al-Qaeda promises to continue its global holy war as long as America keeps troops stationed in the Islamic world and continues its support of Israel and unpopular Middle Eastern regimes. Bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri continue to pursue weapons of mass destruction and have repeatedly stated their willingness to use them against American civilians. No one knows if al-Qaeda is still capable of carrying out an attack on the scale of 9/11. 5 years later, experts say that the war on terror greatly diminished the old al-Qaeda, but they worry that a new al-Qaeda could be more dangerous today than ever.
Al-Qaeda, the organization that carried out the September 11th attacks, is much weaker today than it was 5 years ago. Al-Qaeda, the movement, Al-Qaeda, the global ideology, is much stronger than it was 5 years ago.
It's a movement that runs from Bangladesh to Marrakesh. We're doing nothing to deal with that, absolutely nothing. I think that unless we start a discussion quietly with elements of the Islamic world, we lose. End of story. Forget it.
I think you have to believe that they think they're winning.
Al-Qaeda sees the attacks in Madrid and London as stepping stones to a homegrown attack in the United States.
Yesterday, London and Madrid. Tomorrow, Los Angeles, Allah willing. And this time, don't count on us.
This video is the last time Adam Gadon appears in disguise. The California teenager who loved heavy metal music is now 28 and notorious as Azam the American, the first American to be charged with treason in over 50 years. Gadon is accused of giving al-Qaeda aid and comfort by appearing in its propaganda films.
Anyone who pays any attention to the message.
He represents all that al-Qaeda hopes to be, a truly global movement capable of inspiring Muslims everywhere. The late Abu Musab Zarqawi envisioned a million Gadons, an army of white-skinned militants, blending into Western societies and striking at their very hearts.
I could very easily have been one of those unfortunate souls fighting the losing battle for the other side, or blindly living the life of debt, debauchery, and doubt they call the American dream. We invite all Americans and other unbelievers to Islam. Why not surrender to the truth? escape from the unbelieving army and join the winning side. Time is running out, so make the right choice.